The NFL Combine may be over, but that doesn't mean the implications of the Combine aren't reverberating through the draft sphere. And Doug Kyed of PFF is joining us because he had a chance to talk to Arnold Ebiketie after his explosive Combine performance in Indianapolis. So, Doug, you and I already have a common ground here in that I don't mean to speak for you, but both fans of Arnold Ebiketie and what he did at the Combine.
Yeah, absolutely. Really explosive performance from Ebiketie. It's almost too bad that he only did the broad jump and the vertical jump because it was so explosive on both of those jumps. I would have liked to see, what he would have done with the 4-yard dash and some of the agility drills. But at the same time, with some of the recent numbers that have come out of Penn State Pro Days, it might be smart for him to wait on that until the Penn State Pro Day to put those numbers out there.
Yeah, especially last year with the official times coming from everybody's pro day because of the pandemic and Micah Parsons and Odafe Owe resetting what we think is possible of somebody weighing more than 250 pounds. So pretty good bet for Ebiketie there as well. But with his performance there, I think you did something really interesting too in getting to know him as a player and as a person. I'm a film evaluator here for Blue White Illustrated, so I've taken a long look at what he does on the field. It was interesting to hear his backstory. Being only here for 1 year in Happy Valley, don't have a chance to really get to know everyone as much as you'd like in these situations. So tell us a little bit about Arnold Ebiketie's journey, not just from Temple, but also from learning football early on in his career.
Yeah, he was born in Cameroon, and he came over to the States. He was either 12 or 13 years old. I think he told me that he was 13 because his dad was in the military. They moved to Washington, D.C. I think his dad was working in the embassy or something in the United States. So when he came over, he said his first love was soccer, but basically in order to fit in with his new peers in the United States, he was playing basketball. He learned how to play football. But in Cameroon, he knew absolutely nothing about football. So when he first started playing in high school, he said he was playing running back and he was playing safety. And at running back, he was trying to avoid getting tackled. And at safety, he was basically just trying to find anyone who had the ball and try to tackle him. It wasn't until later on in his high school career that he played wide receiver, he played linebacker. And then, he went to Temple. He was very lately recruited prospect coming out of high school, probably just based on the fact that he was at a smaller school, inexperienced with the game. He was on the smaller side. So he wound up going to Temple because that was his best offer. And he really didn't break out until 2020. And then after that, obviously, he did transfer to Penn State. And he said that one of the reasons they did transfer was that, guys like Owe and guys like Parsons had moved on, had a lot of success, had moved up draft boards and everything like that. Obviously, it goes back to Yetur Gross-Matos as well. So I think that was one of the main reasons why he actually wound up at Penn State, is that he viewed that was a good place for him to have a good shot at the NFL.
Yeah, and PFF was very high on that transfer as well, coming in with Derek Tangelo as a pair of defensive line transfers. And both those guys, in a lot of ways, saved the defensive line for the Nittany Lions after P.J. Mustipher went down with a season-ending injury, and having those guys with Ebiketie, especially as the only true pass rusher, where nobody else had more than, I think, 12 pressures outside of Ebiketie, who was one of the leaders in the Big Ten and in the nation. So his abilities on the field with that backstory, really impressive. What else did you, what is your opinion of, I guess, his draft stock after the Combine and with kind of what you're hearing about him in the draft community?
Yeah, I think that he's solidly in the second round at this point. Based on, he was a fifth-year senior at Penn State. So he's a little bit older than some of the other pass rushing prospects in this draft. He had, basically 1.5 years, 2 years of production in college. So maybe not quite as much production as you might want out of an edge rusher. But as you said, he was one of the most productive pass rushers really in all of college football last season. Over 50 pressures. I think he had like 7 or 8 sacks, number of QB hits, ranked really well in what we regard as true pass sets.
Yep.
So, really kind of going up against an offensive tackle, not unblocked, not, pressures that count really. He did very well in our grading system. So I would say that right now, like I said, second round, I think he helped himself with the broad jump and the vertical jump at the Combine, but I could see him even moving up a little bit more if he does impress at his pro day. And I know that some people don't take those Penn State pro day numbers, as seriously maybe as some
Right.
others. But I mean, Micah Parsons was drafted extremely high last season. Owe was drafted high after he really had much less production at the college level than Ebiketie does. So, I mean, I could still see him potentially slipping into the first round, but I would say it's safest to say second round for him.
Yeah, and I'll get to his game in just a second, but I think a big factor in that is the depth of this particular draft class with the high-end talent as well that's in contention to go number 1 overall all the way down to, maybe having 5 or 6 guys in the first round. So how do you think that plays into the fact of maybe need for players and positional things at the end of the first round? Because positional value, some teams take seriously. I think Joe Tryon, I forget his last name, but went to the Buccaneers at 32nd overall, and they were stocked at pass rusher. So is that a situation where if you've got a good guy, go take him, do you think? Or the number of guys, is that going to push him down draft boards into that second round, and that's kind of where he's going to stay just because he doesn't have some of those? I think size is an issue at 250 for him that NFL teams might not see him as an every down guy.
Yeah, I think that you kind of have to fit him into a certain system. Doesn't have a lot of experience dropping back into coverage. So at 250 pounds, that doesn't help him as well. But no, I think the depth of a position in a certain draft class matters a lot because, not to use an extreme example, but obviously 32 pass rushers aren't going to go in the first round. Like at a certain point, teams view, the value that's on the board. They look at a player like, possibly Ebiketie at the end of the first round and say, okay, can we get a similar player in the second round because this is a particularly loaded draft class at edge defender? I think that could move him down quite a bit. And I mean, just looking at our big board right now, obviously Aiden Hutchinson way up high, Kayvon Thibodeau way up high. We could see Trayvon Walker go, in the top 10, top 15 picks, something like that. Michigan's David Ojabo is way up there. George Karlaftis. It's a really good draft for edge defenders. Jermaine Johnson out of Florida, he's been sneaking up into the top 15. Mm-hmm. So there's all these names there in the top 15, top 20 that, and if that many players go in the first round, there's going to be limiting edge rushers going at the end of the first round. So no, I do think he's a talented player. I think he'll have a good NFL career, but there are just some of those things that are a little bit stacked against him. Like we mentioned, the age, the size, and then just how good this draft class is overall at edge defender.
So it's interesting. You sparked a question in my mind about is it just age? What's the difference between David Ojabo, who really has the 1 year of production, and Arnold Ebiketie, who had production at Temple and then at Penn State and was comparable in the same conference as Ojabo? Is it just the age thing? Is that what people view as upside when it comes to two guys that I think have similar skill sets, similar size even, but one guy is seen as this rising superstar potential, and the other guy who I think is the best pass rusher that Penn State has put out under James Franklin? And I'll get to what I mean by that in a second, but what's the difference there?
I think it is. I think age does definitely play a factor in that because we also didn't see Arnold Ebiketie really shine and stand out until his redshirt junior season and his redshirt senior season. And there's a prevailing thought in the NFL that, if it takes that long for a guy to get up to his peak potential, then maybe it has more to do with him simply being older and, more athletic and stronger and everything than these potential 19, 20-year-olds that he's going up against. We've been talking a lot about Ebiketie's age, obviously, on this, but I also don't know if we really actually know Arnold Ebiketie's age right now. And I'm not saying that because he's coming from Cameroon or anything like that, but his birth date is not posted anywhere on the internet right now. Like, we know that David Ojabo is 21. I think he'll be 22 somewhat soon. Since Ebiketie was a fifth-year senior, I would assume that he's probably closer to 23.
Yeah.
We don't unless I don't actually know how old Arnold Ebiketie is at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting just because of the way Penn State has treated the pandemic. Like, we haven't had a whole lot of in-person contact with players to really, not that I would walk up and ask him what his birthday is or anything like that, but that's some of these things that you miss because you haven't been in person for 2 years. So it is an interesting question. Like, yeah, you're right. I don't know exactly how old he is in this situation. I want to go back to something I said, though, because I have to preface. I don't consider Micah Parsons to be a defensive end because he played pure linebacker here.
Absolutely.
And everyone knew he could rush the passer, but they were teaching him that position at Penn State and then planned on unleashing the pass rushing skills later. Then he opted out of the 2020 season. Ebiketie, and this is I guess going back to my same question about Ajabo or why he's not a first-round pick, is because the explosive metrics are there. 34-inch arms, perfect length for the NFL. His positional skills are better than the guys that went in the first round or went in the high second round with Yetur Gross-Matos. He uses his hands and bends better than those guys. So I guess this is me making my case that Arnold Ebiketie should be a first-round pick, but I totally understand like the depth and upside and all of those things that go into a class. So ultimately, rising up draft boards is how you put in your article how he's being viewed right now. Is that rising to like 33? Do you think, and I know you answered this a little bit earlier, but like, do you think he's going to get in the first round from what you've heard and what you think?
I think it's possible. And like
Okay.
I said, I think that teams do want to see that speed but before it's established whether or not he's going to be a first round pick. I think it's possible. I think that really he's been driving up or like going up draft boards really even since he left Temple. Like it's been over the last year or so. The one other thing, obviously, great length, 34-inch arms. He is only 6'2", and the fact that he's only 250 pounds, I think does hurt him. I'm interested to see what he weighs in at his pro day. I would imagine that he'll probably be around the same weight because sometimes guys try to weigh in a little bit heavier at the combine than they do because they've got they weigh in and then they've got some time to lose it before they actually work out. So I'm curious to see what he weighs in at his pro day and everything like that. But no, I mean, I'm right there with you. He was, out of guys that I've done these types of features on, he was one of the highest graded players that I've talked to. Like I did a feature on Tariq Woolen, who's a cornerback out of UTSA, and we did not grade him very well last season. He's a guy that will go high basically based on his potential. The fact
because he's 6'4" and ran insane.
4.26, whatever it is. Exactly. Like those guys sometimes, and actually he's an older prospect as well. I think that he was a 5th-year senior too, but there's certain tools that obviously you can't teach. And Arnold Ebiketie's explosion is certainly one of those. Doesn't have the ideal size, but if he does show out and run a 4.4 or 4.5 or something like that at his pro day, then I could see him rising even higher during this process.
So I want to ask you now about another guy because I'm going to ask you about 2 more Penn State players specifically, and I'm gonna start with Jahan Dotson so I don't seem like a Penn State homer because I wrote after his performance at the combine, he sort of left the door open for if a team didn't think he was what the NFL's looking for as far as a number 1 wide receiver, from his testing metrics to his size, talk about arm length and all those things that he did not present at the combine, and then he didn't run that sub 4.4. Is that some conversations that you've heard about where Dotson is after the post-combine, or did he basically hold water of he's a really good football player and we don't care about the numbers because we see on film he catches everything that's thrown his way?
I think that there was even some question, I guess, about whether he's going to be a first-round pick before the combine. I don't think that he's a guy who, like you're saying, particularly helped himself at 5'11" and under 180 pounds. Yeah, it would have been nice to see him run sub 4.4, especially since so many wide receivers did run so fast at this year's combine. The one thing that I'm almost throwing out from the combine this year is his 3-cone time. And I think that that's something that will improve a lot at his pro day. He ran a 7.28 3-cone. A lot of the wide receivers actually ran 3 cones this year, but only 2 ran under 7 seconds. I think that part of the reason for that was simply just because it was so late at night when these guys were running. It was after, some of them bench pressed in the afternoon and then ran their 40s, did their verts, did their broad jumps, ran through drills. And then that's usually something that's saved for the end of the night, the 3-cone and the short shuttle. And actually later on with the running backs, I think it was a day or 2 later, they basically told them, okay, we ran out of time. you guys can't run your 3 cones and shuttles, do them at your pro day.
Oh,
and
I didn't realize that they just told them not to. I thought they opted out because they put it at the end of the day and they saw the bad numbers from earlier in the week.
I think so. It was based on a report from Charles Robinson. I shouldn't claim this myself, but
Okay.
Charles Robinson of Yahoo is the one who originally said that they basically told the running backs we ran out of time. But I think that's also an element where they might have seen the wide receivers numbers and saying, okay, this isn't fair to the guys. If they have to run them at 11 p.m., it doesn't make sense in the first place. And really throughout the entire weekend, we barely saw any of the agility numbers. And that's something that I hold a lot of value in.
Me too.
Is those 3 cones. Yeah. Those short shuttles. Who was the Youngstown State cornerback, Zion? I forgot what was Zion McCollum.
Yep.
He set the agility drills on fire. He did unbelievable in those.
But he was the only one that did it, right? He was the only one.
Yeah, he was the only cornerback. So I don't know if you found time in the Indiana Convention Center to do it or something, or what that was when he actually wound up doing it. But yeah, I don't know. That was somewhat frustrating for me, was just the testing in general at the combine.
Yep.
Because I also, this isn't getting into Penn State stuff, but every running back ran way faster, almost to the 10th of a second faster than anyone expected them to. And I'm not exactly sure how that even happened, because all this stuff is electronic and they're doing hand times and everything, where, I love the combine, measurements and everything like that. And this season, I'm almost going to lean on the pro days even more than the combine.
My thought was the NFL sold out the combine for a TV show, because the order of the events also, if you notice, it was, we're going to do the 40, which is the crown jewel of the combine for the TV. And then they went immediately into the most interesting thing after that, which is the on-field drills, and then save the other testing metrics, as you mentioned, till 11 p.m. at night. The other thing is, if somebody didn't want to do the on-field drills, then there's 40 minutes of cool down. You're not going to run those. The order of events prevented you from collecting that information, and I think that was purely a TV sellout so you can get more eyeballs. But Doug, the lifers that watch the combine don't care. They want the numbers. It's built on the love of the game and all of this information. That's what got you here. The casual fans aren't going to show up anyway, I don't think, to the NFL Network. Am I wrong about that? Do you think that was a good gamble?
I mean, I don't think it is. I was at the combine until Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
And then I watched the combine on TV on Saturday night. And I think it was, still on Sunday night. And the first commercial coming out of breaks was, I think, for the Pro Football Hall of Fame gift shop.
Yep.
Which is in Canton, Ohio. It's basically
45 minutes south of Cleveland.
Right. It's a regional commercial airing on primetime on NFL Network during the NFL Scouting Combine. So I think that tells you in itself that maybe that gamble wasn't worth it, when the top ad that they were selling coming out of commercial breaks was essentially a regional ad for the Pro Football Hall of Fame gift shop.
Yeah.
And no, I've been watching, I'm old, so I couldn't even tell you how long I've been watching the NFL Scouting Combine, but before I got into media full time, I would take off work to watch the combine during the afternoon. When I was working on the desk, not covering football, I would try to get my shift so I could watch the combine. And then, up until I was actually covering the combine in Indianapolis, which makes it more difficult to watch the drills, that was something I loved doing. And putting them at night, it's just not the same, especially when you're there in Indy. It's everyone's at bars at night. You can kind of watch it on TV, but not really. And no, I really do wish they would put them back on the afternoon, because it's more beneficial for players. It's more beneficial for scouts, GMs, coaches, these guys who are deciding not even to show up anymore, because I don't know, it's all TV at this point. And usually I'm fine with the NFL making money on these things, but the NFL Scouting Combine isn't going to make you that much money in the long term anyway, I feel like.
Yeah. And the NFL does a great job of making an event out of literally everything, but some events you don't need to go all the way to the Super Bowl for, and I think the Combine is one of them. Do you got a couple more minutes, Doug? Because I know that we've had a great conversation already. I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to ask you about a couple more things.
No, absolutely, yeah.
So I've covered Penn State football for, this is just for you. I've covered Penn State football for about a decade, and I did not have the ability to at the point in time, and I love the draft like you. I've been watching since the combine went on TV. I did not go into the draft process trumping up and pumping up Chris Godwin enough, because I thought he was a first-round talent, And when he went in the third round, I thought that was a mistake. My guy this year, the only guy that I compare to of a guy that's being slept on like that, who I think is going to be potentially a star at the next level at his position, is Jaquan Brisker. I don't understand why he's not seen as a first-round pick when it comes to his ability in the NFL that wants to play too high. You have this too high revolution. You need to have guys that play at every level of the defense. Brisker does that. What am I missing about Jaquan Brisker, why he's not seen as a first-round pick after tweaking his back and running a 4.49?
No, it's a really good question. And he's a guy that, I mean, we were talking about Ebiketie and how he didn't have a lot of, play on tape and everything. I mean, Brisker's been a really highly graded safety for us for 3 seasons. He's played, over 470 snaps over the last 3 years. He's been in that, 82 grade range for 3 years. And like you said, finding a guy who can play back deep is difficult in the NFL. I covered the Patriots for a number of years before I moved over to PFF. And their 2011 defense was one of the worst I've ever seen. They tried to run a cover 2 with Patrick Chung and another strong safety back there. And it's just like, it doesn't work. Their defense basically did not work until they moved Devin McCourty from cornerback to safety in 2012 and 2013. And those are the players that you need to find if you're going to be running 2 high looks, or even, 1 high looks with a guy back there at free safety. You need that rangy guy like Brisker. So no, I'm right there with you. I think that he's a guy who, possibly could sneak into the first round, but I was asking, I think it was a scout about this or an agent or something. And, they were basically saying that after those top 15 picks or whatever, like, it's anyone's guess who's going to wind up in the first round afterwards. It's a really deep draft, which makes it difficult to predict who's going to wind up in those last 12 picks of the first round. And then also who's going to wind up on the day 3 of the draft. Like, any of these guys could go undrafted. They could go in the 4th, 7th round, whatever it is. So I think we're still at the point where it's kind of unpredictable where a lot of these guys could go. So Brisker definitely could still wind up going in the first round. He's another one who's a little bit older. He's going to be 23 soon. But that's the only things that I would really hold against him.
Yeah, PFF's number 1 tackler at safety in 2020, and then I was trying to pull up reference the grades, an 89.5 coverage grade this year as well. So elite in 2 different things, and played through a shoulder injury for most of the season this year. So I just wanted to go on record anytime that I get that the NFL is sleeping on Jaquan Brisker, because I think he's going to be exactly what this next phase of defense really wants, and he can fill those roles. So that's my stump speech on Jaquan Brisker is over. So are there any other prospects from Penn State that caught your eye this weekend, or for good or bad reasons, or anything you've been thinking about that Penn State fans would be interested in when it comes to the 8 players out at the Combine?
Not particularly. Most of my attention was on, Dotson, Ebiketie, and Brisker, but no, I think that it's another really solid draft class for Penn State, which I think is certainly a good thing for the program in general. But no, beyond that, those were the top 3 guys I was really watching this year.
One other thing you wrote about this week when you were putting out some of your notes over at PFF.com, Allen Robinson was at the Combine. Is he trying to find a quarterback for his kids at this point, or what is he doing at the Combine? Because he needs to find a quarterback this offseason. Not the money. He needs to find a quarterback this offseason.
Yeah, I'm with you. And some of the teams that are kind of being thrown out there for him, I'm not sure if that's going to wind up moving along in his favor this year. But it's interesting. It's the second time that he's been at the Combine. He tends to go when he's a free agent. It's extremely rare. Usually the only guys who are at the Combine are there for NFLPA purposes, or like they live there, whatever it is. But I think that, he probably wants to be part of that process with his agents. He's got a few agents. And then there's also a rumor. I forgot who told me this. I apologize if it was someone in the media who kind of passed this along, but I'd at least heard that he has some sort of interest in being an agent at some point. So maybe he just wants to get used to that whole process. There's a lot of former players who have gone on to be agents, so it certainly wouldn't be a surprise if you one of the higher profile names in there. But overall, it just seems like he wants to be part of this process when he is a free agent. But yeah, I mean, there's some teams floated out there that are interested in Allen Robinson. I would not actually be all that shocked if he returned to the Jacksonville Jaguars. At least they've got a quarterback now at this point. I know a lot of people have kind of mentioned the Detroit Lions. They need a wide receiver. They might be willing to throw some money at Allen Robinson, but I know that the market is high for him, and that there's a handful of teams that are pushing that up right now.
Doug Kyed of PFF.com wrote an awesome article about Arnold Ebiketie, getting to know him a little better, folding in the stats and information, the data coming out of the combine. So check that out, PFF.com. Who else do you have coming up for fans that are either subscribers of PFF or want to know more about the draft process? Who are you taking a look at next?
Yeah, I'm actually talking to Cincinnati quarterback Desmond Ridder on Monday. So that'll be really fun. Just kind of want to talk to him and pick his brain about what sets him apart from the rest of this quarterback class. Because I did a number of pieces on quarterbacks last year, just during the season, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo. And one of the things that people talk about with quarterbacks is intangibles. And, if a team is looking for that player this year who's like a winner, it's the most generic thing that someone could possibly say about a quarterback, but You hear it a lot. You hear about Burrow, hear about Mac Jones, like all these guys. And if there is one quarterback in this class that I guess you could quantify or call a winner, it would be Desmond Ridder. He won more than 10 each year of his college career. He was there for 4 years. He really upgraded the Cincinnati program. So I'm just kind of curious to hear even what his thoughts on that tag, that winner phrase is.
Yeah, he broke the ceiling, the invisible ceiling, getting a non-Power 5 school into the college football playoff. So I think a great person to ask about that. And by the way, that right there is what led me to PFF in the beginning, is the it factor, the winner, and all of these things that mean nothing that people throw out as a smoke bomb, like they don't have an answer, so bam, and then they run away. They say culture, and then it doesn't mean anything. So PFF tracks every play for college football. The XFL. Are you doing the XFL this spring? Is that going to be folded in?
We are, actually. Yeah, I think we are.
Well, I'm a huge fan of PFF. I use their stuff all the time.
XFL, I think.
Okay.
And I think we probably will do the XFL too. Yeah.
All right, so you can check them out, pff.com. Premium Stats 2.0 is super helpful. I know we use it all the time at Blue White Illustrated. Doug Kyed here joining us from PFF. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely, anytime.
That'll do it today and this week for the BWI Daily Edition. Make sure you subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. $1. 12 months of access. You can't beat that deal anywhere. And of course, if you enjoyed this conversation with Doug, we do this all the time with media from around the NFL, college football, other players and prospects in the class of 2023 for Penn State football. So subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss any of it. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you next week.